Hello! Da, astăzi sunt singură. Nu vreau să implic pe altcineva. Da, din păcate, n-aveam cum să fac singură. Deși aș fi vrut, deoarece la ce voi reacționa astăzi, el nu va înțelege prea multe, dar bine că vrea să fie lângă mămica lui. Da. Deci, după cum am zis în celălalt clip, vom reacționa la cu totul altceva astăzi. Și veți vedea ce...
I've learned one thing from my one and only experience picking up a hitchhiker. Don't pick up a hitchhiker. It was a Saturday night, probably around 1 in the morning. I was driving down the 542 in New Jersey, a route I commonly took to get into town. It was a long stretch of nothing but woods on either side with the occasional residence. I was on my way back home from town, and as usual at this time of night around our quiet old town, there was not a single other car on the road. I turned on the off-road lights on my Jeep to have optimal vision on the unlit highway, which allowed me to spot somebody far down the road, just standing at the side. As I got closer, I saw him raise his arm up and stick up his thumb. He was trying to hitch a ride. My heart started racing. I had no idea if I should stop or not. I slowed down just to get a better look at the guy, first of all. He seemed like a younger man, maybe 28. He had on a light gray hoodie with the hood over his head and blue denim jeans. The time to make a decision was immediate, and with a lack of my better judgment in the heat of the moment, I came to a stop, rolled down the window, and asked, "Where are you heading to, friend?" "Just up the road," he said in a deep, quiet tone. "Hop in," I called out the window. He opened the door to my Jeep and stepped inside slowly. Jeep Wranglers have very tight seals on the doors, so when he tried to close the door the first time, it didn't shut. I politely said, "Oh, the door didn't shut. Just open and slam it shut real hard. These doors are hard to close." The body language he was giving off in response was unsettling. About 3 seconds after I had finished my sentence, he looked at me, then turned his head slowly to the right, and again waited 3 or 4 more seconds before finally opening the door and then slamming it back shut. By the way this guy was moving, I already regretted my decision to let him in. I put my foot on the gas and we started moving along the road. The speed limit on this road was 55, but I was going 75 just to get the guy to his destination quicker. "So, how far did you say you're going?" There was an awkward gap of silence before he replied with, "Just a few miles up." I wanted to turn the radio on to kill this awkward and downright creepy silence, but something in my head told me not to for whatever reason. Suddenly, I could see just through the corner of my eye that the man had turned his head and was staring in my direction. At this point, I was telling myself that I needed to get this guy out of my car. For a good mile, I felt his gaze just hitting me like a brick, and all the while I tried my best not to look back. Finally, he turned his head the other way and said, "You know, I've been wondering for the longest time if it's just worth it to end it all." I looked at him in confusion. He dug his hand into his pocket and said, "I've been carrying this knife with me for the past few weeks, wondering when the right time would come." He pulled out a big red knife from his pocket, and at that instant I felt like my stomach had dropped out of my body. I told him to put the knife away immediately. He told me in a calm, emotionless voice, "Pull over next to that sign." I did what he said, coming to a stop next to a speed limit sign, and what followed still haunts me. He began to slit his forearm next to 3 other scars from previous assumed self-inflicted cuts and let out a disturbing moan. I managed to choke out the words, "You need to get out of my car right now, buddy." He looked at me again and said, "Get out of the car." I want to show you something. I told him no, and he raised his knife up closer to me as an obvious threat. Just get out for a second. There's something I want to show you behind that sign. I knew my life was on the line and I had to be smart. I said, yeah, okay, man. Let's go. I opened the door to my Jeep, making a point of leaving it open, raised my hands in the air and backed away slowly from the door. He too left the car and started walking over to my side. At the exact moment that he was directly behind the car, I jumped back in, threw it into drive, and floored it down the road, never looking back. I got back home within 10 minutes, still breathing heavily and wanting to throw up. This was the scariest thing that has ever happened to me, and I urge everybody and anybody that if you by some chance see a hitchhiker on a dead road at some odd hours of the night, do not take any course of action other than speeding right past them.
Yep, am lăsat așa doar un mic episod să decurgă. Da. Cred că v-ați dat seama că acum reacționez la True Scary Horror Stories Animated. Sunt 13, astăzi nu cred că mă voi uita chiar la toate, dar avem timp.
I'm sharing this life experience of mine with the internet as a public service announcement to be careful on Craigslist or any similar websites. I happen to be browsing the for sale section of Craigslist trying to find a used laptop. One listing really got my attention, some Dell touchscreen laptop for $250. It looked like it was in good shape with very few minor cosmetic imperfections. I texted the owner, who introduced himself as Dave, and told me I could come pick it up that same night. He offered to meet halfway somewhere so that I wouldn't have to drive all the way out to his place. I live in the countryside, so he lived a solid 10 miles away, which would equate to a 20 to 25 minute drive. Since there aren't many notable places near either of us, we agreed to meet at a 7-Eleven parking lot. I got there at the agreed upon time, which was 10 p.m. sharp. I waited around for a few minutes, then I decided I was going to give him a call. But just as I took my phone out of my pocket to call him, his name came up on my phone. He was calling me. I picked up, skipping the hello, and just said, "Dave, what's going on?" There was a loud background noise on his end, maybe from his driving. There was an initial moment of silence before he started talking. He said he wouldn't be able to make it all the way to 7-Eleven because his car was making weird noises and he didn't want to go too far from home. So he pulled over to the side of the road off some side street. But when we say side streets out here, we don't mean side streets surrounded by buildings or houses. Side streets out here usually mean roads with no streetlights and surrounded by forest or farms. He gave some bizarre description of where he was. There was no way I'd be able to find it ordinarily, so I had him send me his location through his phone. He really was just parked on the side of some side road somewhere. I really didn't know if I was comfortable going at this point. It seemed way too suspicious. I'd heard all about those Craigslist horror stories before, and this seemed like the cliche build-up to one. Against my better judgment, I started driving over to Dave's location anyway. About 5 minutes of driving later on some completely pitch-black road, I eventually saw the reflection of someone's taillights parked on the side of the road. So it had to be him. I pulled up behind the car on the grass next to a large cornfield but kept the car running. I turned my headlights off for a second and it literally became blackness in every possible direction. So I turned the headlights back on. Weird though, I didn't see any light from his car, not even the light from a phone. I called him again. He picked up on the first ring and said he had to run into the crops to take a quick piss and to just get into his car so that when he gets back he could quickly show me his laptop. He hung up before I could even get my response in. This was too weird for me. I really didn't know what to do. I guess I figured I'd step out of the car and just wait behind the door for this Dave person to come out. He said he went into the crops, so I kept my eyes on the right side of the road by the crops. What a strange place to have any kind of exchange other than a drug deal. It didn't seem right at all. I stood right by my car door for the longest time, easily 2 or 3 minutes. There was no way he was peeing for that long. It was starting to seem like it was time to go. I'd give him another 30 seconds, I figured. In the final moments of my waning patience standing there, I thought I heard brushing around coming from the crops. I kept doing double takes from one side of the crops to the other. Dave? I yelled. The brushing sounds in the crops faded away, but a crackling leaf or two from behind my car made me turn to see someone sneaking up on me from behind my car. Exactly what I feared would happen, but that didn't make it any less horrific as I jumped into my car and floored it before the door was even fully shut. I literally loved myself for thinking to leave the car running. If I had turned it off, I may not have escaped in time. Deep down, I kind of knew the situation was far too suspicious to be real. But really, do any of us ever expect things like this to happen? These things are only supposed to happen in horror movies. You're not actually supposed to experience them for yourself. I guess it just remains a story to tell friends and family for years to come.
Nu a fost horror, dar a fost la creepy așa.
When I was about 11, some friends and I were having a slumber party, and we all snuck out of the house in the middle of the night and went to a park about a half a block away. We had been there at least an hour or so when I thought I saw a large figure about 100 feet away, lurking in the shadows under some trees. We all turned to look and stare at the shadow's direction for about 5 minutes, trying to make it out. Right about when we decided we were seeing things, the figure started running at top speed towards us. We jumped up and ran back to the house as fast as we could go and locked the door. We could hear someone moving around the outside of the house, and then someone began tapping on the windows. We couldn't wake anyone up, since we would have to admit that we had snuck out. We spent the night huddled together in the middle of the living room. None of us slept that night.
What? Nu am pățit nimic. Oh, ok. Interesant.
At the time of this story, I had already met a total of 3 people on Match.com. It didn't really work out with 2 of them, and the third one I dated for 4 months. After my breakup, I wanted to take a break from commitment and just find something more casual. And so I matched with a girl named Kylie, who I got along with decently well on the app. She seemed down to just come over to my apartment and hang out for the night. She showed up about half an hour later and seemed really quiet in person. We hung out in my room in the upstairs of my apartment for most of the night. We just talked for a while watching TV in the background. There were a bunch of awkward silences, but I did my best to fill them with new conversations. In the back of my mind the whole time I was thinking, are we gonna kiss? Does she expect me to move in for the kiss? How do I go about it? But hours of talking later, I started to realize there was something wrong with this girl. She became increasingly more emotionless. She was staring off across the room as she'd talk slowly, talking about increasingly deep and dark things. Then she said something surprising. She thanked me for allowing her to sleep over. Apparently, when I said she could come hang out for the night, she meant to literally stay the night. She got off the bed and asked what blanket she could use for the floor. I grabbed a couple blankets and pillows and made a sort of bed for her on the floor. She thanked me and then laid down on her side facing away from me. I guessed she was ready to go to sleep. I turned off the TV and closed my eyes. We didn't say a single word to each other, and I have to admit it was very awkward. I fell asleep probably half an hour after shutting the TV, but I awoke randomly in the middle of the night. I sat up and looked down at the floor and was able to see that Kylie didn't appear to be laying on the floor anymore. I flipped on the lamp and looked around the room. She wasn't anywhere, actually. But just then, I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like it could be Kylie. All the walls in my apartment are paper thin, so noise travels quite easily throughout it. I quietly left my room and stood at the foot of the top of the stairs, listening for what Kylie could be saying. All the lights upstairs were off, but she was talking in a low voice. I just couldn't tell for sure what exactly she was saying. I figured she was on the phone with someone, but still, I went downstairs to check. I stepped into the dark kitchen, and there she was. But she wasn't on the phone. She was just creepily sitting in one of the chairs facing the wall, She seemed to still be muttering to herself. I was frozen. All I could say was, Kylie? She turned her head to me slowly, looked at me for a few seconds, then turned back to face the wall. I went upstairs quickly to my room and crawled into my bed to call my dad. I had to call at least 3 times before he finally picked up, obviously sounding concerned. I told him in a quiet panic that some random girl from online was staying the night, and now she was sitting in my kitchen muttering to herself like a crazy person. He sounded confused as hell, but told me to call 911 if she seemed like she was having some kind of episode to safely get her out of there. Then I looked up and noticed a figure standing by my bedroom door in the dark. It was Kylie. All I saw was the outline of her skinny body. She stood there for maybe 10 seconds. It was my dad on the other end of the phone saying hello over and over. The next thing I saw was the silhouette of Kylie at my door suddenly charge at me in my bed as she began to scream. She lunged at me and put her hands around my throat, trying to choke me. However, I was able to quickly overpower her and hold her down against the bed. I screamed at my dad to call the cops. I was able to drag the insane girl downstairs by the time the cops came. The cops took her away to fill out a few documents. I think it's safe to say that you should always meet people from websites and apps in a safe, public place first.
Ai văzut? Era supat.
Și cum atât că acest sper că v-a plăcut.
Da. Ultima poveste a fost ceva mai creepy. Au fost doar 3, dacă nu mă înșel, 4. Anyway, oricum o să mai fac un clip de acest gen, să continui aceste povești. Inițial am vrut să fac toate acestea singure, deoarece el nu prea are niciun rost, că nu înțelege engleză. Dar a vrut să stea cu mămica lui. Și mi-a ținut
mătuși mai știe.
Mătușa lui fiind sora mea cea mai mică, ea știe foarte bine engleză, dar nu vrea să apară. So, mulțumesc că v-ați uitat și ne vedem data viitoare.